I've always been fascinated by stories that seem to come from nowhere, that appear fully formed in the mind of the storyteller, with no discernible inspiration or influence. These stories just are, and they know it, too. They have an air of inevitability about them, like their telling is predestined. This is one such story. It came to me in a dream, vivid and fully realized, and now I can't get it out of my head. I hope that you enjoy it. In the 1800s, there were exactly 3 ways to go missing. You could run away from home, usually after some kind of falling out with your family, often over some girl or boy that you were seeing. Sometimes you would run off with that person, but not always. Sometimes you would just run off on your own. Then you would go and do something stupid, like rob a stagecoach, or join the circus, or get on a boat and go to sea. And if any of those things went badly for you, then your bones would end up scattered on the prairie or thrown overboard into the ocean. The second way you could go missing was by getting kidnapped, most commonly by people traffickers or, if you were particularly unlucky, gypsies. And the third way you could disappear was to be taken by the mountain. The mountain takes people sometimes, even today. There are entire villages in the Italian Alps that are effectively abandoned, because the mountain has taken everyone who lived there. Entire families will vanish while tending their fields, only to be replaced by empty houses and dead livestock. Houses are sometimes found with the dinner still on the table, the beds still made, the front door wide open. People just disappear into the Italian Alps all the time. Back when I lived abroad, there was a time that I got lost up in the mountains myself. I had been hiking for days and I became disoriented and couldn't find my way back to the trailhead. I ended up wandering through the mountains for almost 2 weeks, surviving off berries and rainwater. I lost all sense of time and wandered aimlessly until I was finally found by a search and rescue team. They said that I looked like a wild animal, all dirty and matted and covered in scratches. And I remember thinking at the time that I probably looked like someone who had been taken by the mountain. People say that the mountains are alive. There are ancient stories that tell of the mountains as sentient beings that slumber beneath the earth, breathing life into the valleys and crushing everything in their path. In the old folk tales, the mountains are always malevolent, capricious, violent. They take people just for fun, sometimes. They swallow entire villages just because they're hungry. So when people disappeared, people used to ask, were they taken by the mountain? And this question hangs over the following tale like a shroud. In the spring of 1889, a man named Lorenzo Stedel left his home in the village of Argelatina to go and work in his fields. Lorenzo was a poor farmer, barely scraping by on the land that he owned just outside of town. He was a widower, his wife having died several years earlier, and he had 3 young children to take care of. His daughter Rosa was 7, his son Ettore was 5, and his youngest, a baby girl, was only 8 months old. Lorenzo was due back in the village by nightfall, as the sun dipped below the jagged teeth of the Italian Alps, casting long shadows across the valley. Lorenzo had told his children that he would be back before dark, so that they wouldn't be scared. But when the sun began to set, Lorenzo was still not home. Now, Rosa was a smart child, even at 7 years old. When her father didn't show up for dinner, she knew that something was wrong. So she did what any reasonable child would do. She put on her little shoes, grabbed a basket, and went out to look for her father. The village elder warned her not to go too far out of town, as there were wolves in the mountains that roamed the valley at night. Wolves that could smell fear and blood and would tear a child's throat out without hesitation. But Rosa was worried about her father. She needed to make sure that he was okay. So she put on her little red cloak and walked past the old woman's house and into the mountains. She called out for her father, but the only reply was the crunch of her shoes on the gravel road. Soon enough, she was out of range of the village. All around her, the mountains loomed dark and silent. She quickened her pace, afraid of what might be waiting for her in the darkness. Suddenly, she heard a noise behind her, a twig snapping, the rustle of leaves. She whirled around, heart pounding, but saw nothing. Just as suddenly as it had started, the noise stopped. Shaking, Rosa continued on down the road. She walked for what felt like hours, calling for her father and occasionally hearing noises in the trees that made her jump. Finally, she came to a small clearing and, in the center of it, a farmhouse. Maybe her father had stopped for a rest on his way home. Maybe someone inside could help her find him. Taking a deep breath, Rosa knocked on the door. A moment passed and the door opened. Standing in the doorway was a gaunt, pale-faced woman with hollow eyes. Her hair was wild and tangled, her clothes filthy and torn. Before Rosa could say a word, the woman reached out and grabbed her basket. Then she reached for Rosa's cloak. Startled, Rosa pulled back, knocking the woman's hand away. "What are you doing?" she cried. "Where's my father? Has he been here?" The woman stared at her for a moment, her eyes unblinking. "He is here," she whispered, her voice raspy and thin. "But you cannot stay." "Why not?" The woman shook her head. "You shouldn't be out here, child. Go home before it's too late." Something in the woman's eyes and tone made Rosa uneasy, but she was desperate to find her father. So she pushed past the woman and into the house. The interior of the house was dark and smelled of decay. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling and dust lay thick on the floor. The woman followed Rosa into the room and closed the door behind her. "Father, are you here?" Rosa called out, her voice echoing in the vast emptiness. There was no reply. Then, from the corner of her eye, Rosa saw movement. She turned and gasped. In the corner was a rocking chair, and in the chair sat a cloaked figure. The figure was hunched over, shaking with what appeared to be sobs. "Father!" Rosa cried, rushing to the chair. The figure slowly turned his head, and Rosa's blood ran cold. The face that stared back at her was not her father's. It was the same gaunt, pale face that had greeted her at the door. But now the face was contorted in a grotesque parody of a smile, revealing teeth that were too sharp, too long, too numerous. The last thing Rosa remembered was the smell of wet dog and blood. That night, a search party was organized to look for little Rosa. Her little shoes were found on the side of the road near the village. Her red cloak was found snagged on a rock face high up in the mountains, but little Rosa was never seen again. Some say that she was taken by wolves, others that she fell victim to the mountain. But I believe that she was taken by the woman with the sharp teeth and the smell of wet dog and blood. Because sometimes the mountains take people, and sometimes the mountains are just the cover for something worse. Thank you for watching.